take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Most of us, excuse me, most of us have probably never seen a yoke except possibly in our old history books or in an old National Geographic magazine that was gathering dust in the house. But a yoke in biblical times was always that long piece of wood, very long, with two half circular cuts in the end, and it was placed on the back and the shoulders of the oxen, and it was attached to a wagon. Obviously, they were a beast of burden, and the yoke helped them carry it. Boy, the yoke always looked very heavy and cumbersome to me, and tough to carry. So I don't really understand what Jesus means when he says, "Take my yoke upon you, for my burden is light." But let me tell you a story, a personal story about myself when I was 12 years old. When I was 12 years old, every summer between 10 and 15, let me backtrack. My mother was born and raised in Nebraska, and she had an aunt, Aunt Ann, who lived on a farm with her husband, Uncle Joe, and they had 8 children. And every summer, my mother, good or bad, shipped us out there for a month or so, and we spent a whole month at my aunt and uncle's farm in Nebraska. And it was tough living. I mean, they had no electricity, no plumbing, no electricity, no lights, no radio. The light at nighttime was strictly an oil lamp. There was no running water, and worst of all, there was no indoor plumbing. The outhouse was 25 yards away. But after the chores were finished at night, the usual chore that had to be done was we had to bring water up to the farmhouse for the next day's clothes and drinking and water. And my cousins usually did it. But the first time, Uncle Joe asked me, he said, "Jamie, do you think you can bring up 2 5-gallon buckets of water to the house tonight?" And I looked at him, and this macho 12-year-old kid said, "Yeah, no problem." So we walked over to the well. We filled up 2 5-gallon buckets of water, and we put them in both of my hands. Do you know how much a 5-gallon pail of water weighs? A gallon of water is 8 pounds. So a 5-gallon pail of water, it was 40 pounds. I had 40 pounds on my left hand and 40 pounds on my right hand as I started to walk up towards the farmhouse. I got about halfway there, and the pain was excruciating. My arms were they were going to come off. I didn't know what I was going to do. And Uncle Joe had firmly warned me, "Don't put the buckets down because you'll pick up barnyard debris." I finally made it to the house, and I just kind of plopped the buckets. I didn't even take them inside. I just plopped them on the stairs outside. I was totally exhausted. I didn't realize the burden that this water took on me. But I didn't know it. But Uncle Joe was just testing me. The next day he said to me, "Jamie, I have something to make it easier to carry your load." And what he had taken, a 2x4, about 4 feet long, and in the middle of it, he half carved a half circle out of it, and he put this wood over my shoulder, and he called it a yoke. And on each end of it, he had a long rod, and at the end of the rod was a hook. So we went back to the well, and he put the yoke on my shoulders. We put a 5-gallon bucket on my left hook, a 5-gallon barrel in the right hook, and I started my journey to the farmhouse. Man, was it easier. This yoke that he placed on my shoulder made my burden so much lighter. In fact, I could have walked probably out to the main road. I felt so good about it. It finally dawned on me, after all these years, the term, "Take my yoke upon me and learn from me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light," made sense to me. Jesus makes many yokes available to us, and this is the key word, available. We have to want to put these yokes on our shoulders to help us carry us through our life, to help lighten our burdens. If the yoke that we can put on our shoulders is the yoke of prayer, our burden will be lightened. If the yoke we can put on our shoulders is the yoke of trust in God, our burden will be lightened. If the yoke we can put on our shoulders is the yoke of the knowing God loves us and cares for us, our burden will be lightened. If we can make good use of these yokes that are available through us, that Christ makes available to us, these yokes of trust and prayer and hope in Him, we will have the strength and courage necessary to carry our own personal buckets of worry and problems. All of us have got buckets of problems in our lives, personal sadnesses that we carry with us. Some buckets we have are lighter than others, some are heavier. But they make it so much lighter with God's help or God's yoke to help me carry my own burdens. In our own parish, we have many people who are weighted down with many problems. Some are visible. If you have a cane or a walker or a wheelchair, that's a visible problem. But many problems are invisible to most of us. It could be a daughter going through a divorce, an estranged family, a son having drug problems, or it could be just plain old debilitating arthritis. All burdens that we are carrying down bringing down our spirits. Basically, the Christian message is this: God will help us bear up under our burdens. He has fashioned a yoke and has made it available to us to help us carry our crosses, our buckets of problems. Unfortunately, we will not escape pain or suffering. That's just part of life. But God will give us the grace to help carry us this load. Jesus is our yoke to help us in our life. So remember, in closing, that your problems, when they become insurmountable, when they become unbearable, when the pain seems you just can't take it anymore, the yoke of Christ's love, care, compassion, and forgiveness is here to help us carry our burdens. Put Christ on your shoulders, and He will always help you carry your burden. So the last line of that gospel today best sums up the homily. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for you will find rest for yourselves. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Thank you for joining us for this celebration of the Mass. This virtual Mass is broadcast to hundreds of people every day of the week. You know, over 100 years ago, the very first celebrations of the Mass took place on the second floor of the Glenview Public House. It's been inconceivable that 100 years later, we would be reaching so many people all over the world through this technology. If you'd like to support the ongoing broadcasts of OLPH's Masses, please go to our website, go to Give Central, and you'd be able to support the ongoing outreach of this virtual ministry. Thank you for your support. Most of all, thank you for joining us in prayer. God bless you.